Roger, thanks for dropping by. This is a video in the store-bought Phalaenopsis series. These are the ones that were bought to deliberately grow in the home, trying to replicate the circumstances that lots of other people have, rather than the grow room, which is a more, an environment more suited to orchids, shall we say. We bought two, but last time they were repotted, there were two plants in one of the pots and they got potted up separately. They may go back in a single pot this time. Reason being, they are sitting on the end of my dining room table, and 3 pots takes up a lot more room than 2. So they may end up going back into one. I'm hoping these are going to come out okay. As I say, this one's not, because 2 of the roots have gone through the bottom of the pot and they form a resistance. They won't pull back through, so they just get cut off. Now, Phalaenopsis will often grow a continuous root system. It's not too bad. I don't think it's gone, but I want to refresh it now before any new roots start. And we'll have a look round and see if we've got old roots that need trimming off, just to tidy up. Things like this, these are not worth keeping. That one's dead. So there's an amount of dead roots on here. So let's get rid of them straight away. They're not staying. The only ones I would leave are ones that look like they could branch, which won't be many. What I really would like it to do is come back into growth and actually start producing some new roots. And sometimes trimming up the old roots is exactly what it needs to do that. It's sort of the plant registers some damage and then puts its best foot forward to try and replace that damage. Now, some of this bark, I'm not going to tear this bark off because it's firmly attached and it will damage what are good roots. So yeah, not too bad. Not too bad. I would have preferred more roots than this, but just taking the really old ones off should spark some new stuff. Take that old flower spike off. Okay, alright, so we'll leave it at that. And yeah, we'll leave it at that. So that's one. And the other one that is in effect came out of the same pot originally is this one. So that one hadn't gone through the bottom of the pot, but it had gone through the side instead, but that threaded back through okay. Now, you might think I actually had moss in the pot, which would be against the grain for a Phalaenopsis, but that moss wasn't in the pot, it was on the top of the pot. Mainly because in the home with the dry air and the heating on, they were drying out so fast, they were winning the race at the top of the pot, where the top of the pot and the associated roots were absolutely bone dry and the lower part of the pot was still soggy, which is always a dilemma. Do you water when you can see some roots are drying out, but if you water, you're just going to add more moisture to an area that's already quite wet. So the idea is to get a pot that's balanced. Okay, that's okay. That's not too bad a root system. As I said, some fresh media might trigger a response from the root area. Now I was going to say, I've got to keep this one separate because this is a different type, but it's actually got a bloom on it. Now, if you're going to repot something in bloom, I do recommend you take a stake off. The bloom spike is highly unlikely to break even if you waggle it around. Let's see what we've got in here. Have we got any coming out the bottom? Yes, but only just, so that will thread back through. Right. What have we got? I'll try to redo my scissors. It's because I'm changing plants. I know the other 2 were 2 separate plants, and I should have done my scissors in between, being pedantic, but at the end of the day they were the same plant out of the same pot originally. So if one was infected, they both were. Let's put it that way, because they came from the same pot. Right, quite a few have got of the roots on here have gone badly. So I'll get rid of what I can obviously see has gone, and then we'll see what's left. It's always easier to get rid of the worst first, get them out of the way, and then you can see what's left. I'm going back to where a root is sound. These are all reasonable. Go over here then. One's gone. It's gone up to there where it had a break in it. Right, we're okay at that point. So, now this media, I don't think it's gone, but I've got a problem in my mind with the Orchids bark, which this would have been, going back to when this was last repotted. Obviously at the end of this video I'll put a link to the playlist, but the number of videos in that playlist is getting quite high. I can't imagine that somebody would want to sit down and watch all of them, but what I will do is pick out the one from, I'll put the playlist up there. Some people might want to watch it all, relatively new and haven't seen it, but what I will do is pick out the one where these were last repotted. I think it's a single video, so that you can go back and see how they were repotted, and that'll have a date on it as well, so you know when. The problem I've got with the Orchids bark is its age. Now this still feels quite hard, but it's holding water, so it is getting old. And in addition to that, it was bought quite a long time before I got round to using it, and then we've got the fact that it's aged in its pot. So the actual bark in real terms is actually quite old, and although it doesn't appear to be breaking down, it would be holding nutrients, because it is able to stay wet for some considerable time, and that can lead to a build-up in the pot of salts that you don't want. And it's all very well saying, oh, it's okay, I flush it. Do you know actually how much time the water spends in contact with the bark when you pour it through a pot? It's about 2 seconds if you're lucky. That's not enough time to draw out all of the nutrients that may be being held in the bark because it's staying wet. A true flush would be stand the whole pot in quite a large volume of water and leave it to soak for some time and allow the bark to leach out what it's got in it and replace it with pure water. But we haven't got time a lot of the time to mess about doing that sort of thing, so we don't. Right, we'll get rid of this, then we'll have a think about what they're going to get repotted in, and are they going back in the same pots? Probably, because those have already got the holes in, so they'll need a wash. So I'll get all that done and I'll be back. Okay, now something a bit different. I have decided that the two plants that are the same are going in the same pot to save space, save media, save pots. So the plant that's on its own will get the air cone pot, because obviously the root mass to volume of media needs to be less because it's only one plant, as opposed to that one which is not an air cone pot, which will give two plants a bit of room to expand. Now I've got my giant bark, that's going in the bottom of the pot, a fair bit of it. Now, hang on, I've got to untangle these plants here. Now this is the one for the single plant, that's the one that's in bloom. Okay. Now you'll notice the plants are wet, they've had a wash under the tap. When you've got plants indoors, I can guarantee you that the leaves will collect dust. Probably not so much in a grow room because of the humidity, but in a house you've always got dust. Will just blow. Make sure there's none in the crown, although in the dry atmosphere of a house that would dry so quick as to probably not matter. Now some say you shouldn't put aerial roots in the pot. I don't want aerial roots hanging out of this plant, so I am putting them in the pot. They will make it or they won't. Now for a while, part way up the pot, I want to continue with the large chunky bark, so I'm just dropping it down through the holes so that it climbs up the pot a bit more than it is now. Notice the plant's staying quite upright on its own. It's not needing any help, it's because it's resting on the top of the pot. So I'm using the pot to actually hold it still. Now I'm only taking this bark up so far. So I see a couple of little holes there that we will get some down in. Now you don't need to compact your media for Phalaenopsis. They really do like a fair bit of air around them, and if they get into a compact media they will often rot. That's temperature dependent and all sorts of other things. So I'm about 2/3 of the way up the pot now. I'm happy with that, and some roots are down in that chunky bark. Now from this point on we're going to change, and we're going to have a smaller bark mix with some coconut husk. Does that sound a bit daft for a Phalaenopsis? In the grow room that would be silly because of the high humidity. I wouldn't want moisture around the base of the plant, but in the house with the dry air I do. The reason is that I don't want the top of the pot to continually dry out. So by adding some coconut husk in, I'm giving it the ability to hold its moisture longer, whereas the bottom of the pot has got the really large chunky bark, lots of air and holes in the side and the bottom of the pot. So it's only the top of the pot that will be subjected to this media, and the idea is that this will keep the top of the pot and those roots near the surface moist. I'm not going to press this down, I'm just letting it loosely fall. Still want the air there, but I want the ability to hold moisture around the top of the pot, which the poor old plant hasn't had before. It's been drying out. The problem being is that with a dry atmosphere around the top of the pot, it's not conducive to encouraging some root growth from the stem. You know, it might be why I haven't had much. So there we are. Not pressed down, just gently up around the base of the plant, higher than I would normally go, but I want to try and encourage some root growth. So I am letting that moisture get up round there. Don't forget with the cocoa husk, it has got a lot of air. So although it holds some moisture a lot longer than moss would, it doesn't hold it for a huge amount of time. It's not like it's going to stay wet for a week in the house. That's not going to happen. Yeah, so now that, even though that cocoa husk is wet, we'll get a really good watering now. It'll get an absolute soak because the bark doesn't hold water for some time. It'll be bone dry. So we'll give that a good soak. That's one done. Right, now I've got to try and get two in one pot. This could be fun. So again, we'll start with the chunky stuff. The roots are quite long on these plants, so I'm not putting much in the bottom because I don't want the pot sticking out, the plant sticking out the top of the pot. I want these roots down in there, all of them. So that's going to go like that. I'm flashing the blooms around here. And then this one's going to have to try and tuck in the hole like that. So I've got one root getting in the way here. So I want them sort of like that, so that this one leans out and this one leans in the opposite direction, and they run alongside each other, because if you think Phalaenopsis are like linear plants, they're wide in one direction but not in the other. So right. Now we've got to get the chunky stuff down in all the holes as best we can, same as we did before. It's the same principle. It's just that in this pot the ratio of roots to media mass is quite different because there's two plants gone in here, so there's a lot more roots in this pot than there is in the other pot because there's two plants in there. Right, there's that side done. So let that go back. Get over here now, there's a great big hole there. I think I'm going to have enough in this bag. It's not the end of the chunky bark when this bag's gone. I've got two more, but it actually got split up into 3 bags. I don't know whether it arrived as 3 bags or whether I split it as 3 bags. I can't remember. It's a while ago now. But I like this bark. To me, is excellent quality, large bark. Excellent. It's rock hard. I think it will last a very, very long time. So right, that's the big stuff. Now I'm going to do the same as I did before and actually get. I need a couple of big bits down between the two plants. Otherwise they're not going to separate. There we go. Right, so now I'll get those straightened up once I get the smaller media in there, and they'll move and stay by moving them into a gap and then pushing the smaller media into the gap left behind, and then they'll stay put. So I can straighten them up in a minute. I actually brought my charcoal out to use and then didn't. Don't think it's necessary for this mix, quite honestly. This mix isn't going to go off very quickly, that's for sure. Right, let's see what we can do now then. So, first place I want this media. This plant is leaning over quite a bit, so we'll straighten that one up first. So we need the media down in there. And hopefully when I let go it will stay there, because the media is replacing the big gap that there was there. So I can see a big gap there, but I think it's a large piece of bark stopping me getting down there. Never mind, not with a Phalaenopsis. Right, so now before I push the other plant, I want some down in between the two of them. Sort of like that. Then we'll push this one away from the side of the pot and get down there. Oh, I've managed to leave a couple of roots outside the pot. Too late now. I'm taking it all out just to tuck them in. This leaf I've got in my hand now is going to come off soon. It's really limp, so it's going to become old and tired and yellow and drop off very soon. Right, how do they look now? I'm still flopping over a bit, isn't it? I mean, that's how they would normally grow, but it's traditional when you've got a pot indoors to actually try and stand the plant upright. It's only for show. That's not how they would normally grow. They'd normally keel over sideways. And that's why they don't collect water in the crown in the wild, because they keel over sideways. Right, that'll do. Make sure I haven't left any bark on the leaves. Yep, that looks good. Make sure there's no bark on this one. It's potentially going to get washed down into the leaf joint if you leave the bark on there, so it's better to get it off. I'll take that one up a little bit higher. Right, that's it. Mixed up far too much as usual. Never mind. So good watering for those two now. Before I put them back in the lounge, and then they'll probably need a good watering possibly every day, but probably every other day, because it's still heating time. You know, I'm still having the heating on. It's not warm enough yet to survive without the heating on, especially sort of sitting down in the evenings, you know, when you stop moving around, you notice the temperature a lot more. I mean, the heating's not on now, and it went off earlier this morning, and it probably won't come back on again until tea time, but it will probably come back on later today. So there we go. Now, our odd plant, it's actually got a tag. It's not a proper name. It's Anthura Amsterdam, which is just a trade name. That's not a proper name, but it does help differentiate between the two. Apart from the fact it's in bloom, of course. So we will put the tag back in there, because obviously those blooms won't last forever. Right, there we go then. That's those repotted. Another one in that series. This store-bought Phalaenopsis series, as a series, really, it runs indefinitely until such time as these plants die, or I don't grow orchids anymore, or something like that, you know. So it won't get updated very often, only when something major happens. But yeah, I'm happier with those 3 plants in 2 pots. I'm happier to look after those now because of the positioning where they are. And the other couple of plants I've got, 2 of them went quite close to the doors to the grow room, so they're quite bright light, but one of them had to step back because they formed a triangle. Now they can all go quite close to the glass. And this one can be turned, so like it can spend some time like that and then some time like that, or I could just put it that way and then turn it around like that. But either way, because there's 2 plants in there, one's going to get more light than the other, so it will need turning probably every time I water them. So there we go, that's that done. You don't see me playing with Phalaenopsis very often, but quite honestly they're pretty sturdy and robust plants, and made me laugh. I saw Peter White once. He's Orchid Accessories is his website. It's where I've in the past got a lot of my equipment from, you know, pots and things like that, and the Orchiata bark. But he did a repotting video. It was filmed at a garden centre, and basically he yanked the plant out like that and just went snip and cut all the roots off like as a haircut. Just the whole lot went off like that. And he said, don't worry, they'll all grow again. And he pulled it and bashed it around, shoved it in a pot, fisted it down in there, and says, yeah, that'll be fine. It probably was, but it's a bit heavy-handed for my liking. Some water in the crown of that one, and that one's okay. And that one's okay. Quite honestly, in the home with the dry air, that water wouldn't cause any problems. So, right, that's that then. See you next time.